So here is the Film Master demo art. Here's my super villain costume, and you can see that I have a little mask which has a little antenna that has a little film on it. I have lasagna in one hand, film in another hand, and then I have a utility belt which has lasagna. This is fire lasagna, I think, and then just lasagna. So there we go. I do have another costume I'm wearing today. This is my 16 millimeter basketball jersey that we wore when we competed against Found Footage Festival, and that competition is showing later tonight at 9 o'clock, and I'll have a link for that very soon, and I'll put it in the comments, and I'll try to figure out a way to link it in YouTube and put it on other social media. But I'm Skip Elsheimer, and this is the AV Geeks Lunchtime streaming show where we watch old 16 millimeter films, and I'm happy you guys are joining us. Let's see, what do we got set up on the scanner? Oh yeah, Jeff sets sail. See, I'm getting better. We have the scanner set up, and let's watch a film. Enjoy. Something weird's going on here. Hold on, give me a second. So I apologize for that film. For some reason, the scanner was scanning at 18 frames a second, and so that's why I was like, "Wow, those songs seem really slow." And I looked, and I was like, "Oh." Anyways, so here's lunchtime streaming show from. Let's see. From May 11th, and you can see. Whoops. Let me move it over. That it is Books Are for Burning, and Batman and Robin are there, and they're going, ah! And the Grand, I think Poloni, I'm going to light you on fire. And then in the chats, Old Radio says, is that Batman? Nathan says, it couldn't be. William says, 1966. Tara Note says, I don't think so. Year 1966, year 1966. It's Batman. And then I write, no, it isn't. And so this is Batman versus the Film Master. And you're all in it. That's what's so great. Let's see. I got this new presenter, so I'm trying to figure this thing out. All right. Batman Comics, the Film Master. So Gotham City cops are going to, can't read what that says. The film museum. What do you think we should do in Commissioner Gordon's office? And they all say, call Batman. So then we see Batman racing through the city. And I think we are in the chief's office, and there's a diploma from the police school. I think the Film Master has struck again. And it says, hey, Telecine. This is where it gets nuts. This is the Film Master's hideout. And there I am. And I'm going, what lovely films. And there's Film Shelf. And you see I'm wearing my costume. They're almost as lovely as you, Katrina. And you see Katrina is there. And then we kiss, and it's a very passionate kiss. Now we can... the staples here. Something caper. The biggest caper of Gotham City. And then in the Batcave, gosh, that Film Master guy must have a big caper planned. That's what Robin says. And then Batman says, move it over a little bit. something possible locations for the film master to strike. Oh, he's talking to the computer. The computer's going ding, 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 ding. The 4th annual Gotham City Film 8mm Film Festival. The private showing of the rarest 8mm films in Gotham City Hotel. And something famous, something that's 18mm films that Gotham City is holding. And then Robin says, isn't that weird that the film master only stole 16mm films? That's it. 16mm films. The 16mm film auction on 34th Street. Let's go. Later at the film auction, and it's me going, so many films. The Count Spirocheete must be in there somewhere. And you can see there's actually lot numbers for the auctions. And Peter gets it. Then there's my film bag. And I'm grabbing the film. And there's Count Spirocheete for $200, and I snag it. Then from off camera, someone goes, "Stop, evildoer!" And I jump into I'm running to the filmmobile with my film bag, and then there's my filmmobile. And then a chase scene begins, and we're at the Turner Warehouse. All right. We're gonna get back to watching some more films. I know I've been obsessing over these guys, but it's so great to see kids' brains interpreting and kind of extrapolating based on what we have. So this next film is Biography of a Bee. It's a Moody Institute of Science film, which means it just has a taste of science to it before they start extrapolating themselves and start talking about social orders and a lack of morality in a social order, etc. Enjoy.
Honeybees are social insects. They always live in groups. In fact, they cannot live alone. Honeybees live together in hives. These hives are like our cities and towns in some ways. In a city, different people do different jobs so that the needs of all may be met. Some help supply us with food. Some build our homes. Some carry information between us. Some protect us from various dangers. Some keep our cities clean. And some are busy growing up, preparing for the many different jobs necessary for the welfare of the community. The beehive, like every other community, has need of food, construction, communication, protection, cleanliness, and continuation. Let's follow the life of a bee to see how these needs are met. A bee begins life as an egg in the bottom of a cell. In about 3 days, the egg hatches. The baby bee, or larva, does not look much like the adult bee that brings it its meal. The larva's first food is a drop of bee milk, a jelly-like stuff from glands in the heads of nurse bees. The nurses supply fresh food every 4 or 5 minutes, day and night. After about 3 days on bee milk, the formula is changed to nectar or honey and water. Although it has grown, the helpless, legless grub still cannot even move out of its cell. Its every need must be met by busy nurses. After 6 days as a larva, the baby bee is ready for a new type of life. The nurses close the end of the cell using a special material which lets air through so that the larva inside can breathe. The larva then lines the cell with silk and begins to change into the winged, 6-legged adult. After the change is complete, about 12 days later, the young bee chews a hole in the covering and struggles out. Even before she completely emerges, she may get a drop of bee milk, her first food in 12 days, for she has not eaten since the cell was sealed. After emerging, she first cleans herself while her wings dry and harden. Then she goes to work cleaning out cells. She helps herself to food, eating honey for energy and pollen for the protein needed for the development of her flight muscles, and later on for the production of bee milk. After 3 days cleaning cells, she becomes a nurse bee, caring for the larvae, or babies. After a week or so of nursery duty, she becomes a construction worker. She builds honeycomb which will be used as cribs for the larvae or for storing honey and pollen for food. In order to produce the wax needed to construct honeycomb, she first stuffs herself with honey and then hangs with the other bees for a full day while 8 wax glands under her abdomen produce tiny flakes of wax. She then chews the bits of wax into the proper place on the comb. The cells of the honeycomb have a special shape, 6 sides with pointed ends that fit together, so that cells face 2 ways. Scientists who have carefully studied honeycomb say that it uses less wax and is stronger than any other shape. By the time the bee is ready to begin building comb, her wing muscles are well developed. She takes short flights around the hive, memorizing landmarks so that she can find her way back later on when she begins to visit flowers. After 5 days of comb building, she begins a period of odd jobs, tasks that are important to the welfare of the hive. She may spend some time carrying out and dumping trash to keep the hive clean and the bees healthy. She may act as a guard, patrolling the entrance to protect the honey and pollen stored for use during the winter months. All trespassers are considered robbers and are attacked vigorously. She may also work at changing nectar into honey, and she may take part in the temperature control of the hive. However the temperature outside may vary, bees maintain a uniform temperature inside. They have to, for a temperature too high or too low will kill the larvae. When the temperature starts to drop, adult bees stuff themselves with honey and crowd together to form a living blanket around the comb containing larvae. If the temperature starts to rise, some bees collect water and spread it within the hive. Other bees stand in the doorway and fan their wings to create a draft in one side and out the other. This evaporates the water and cools the hive. This odd job period lasts about 3 days. Finally, she becomes a food collector, visiting flowers for nectar and pollen. But she doesn't fly off in just any direction. The collection of food like the other activities in the hive, is well organized. A few scouts go out to look for worthwhile amounts of food. We can more readily see what the scout does by setting out a saucer of sugar water. The scout that finds the saucer flies back to the hive to tell the other bees about it. A dance tells the bees what direction and how far to fly, and soon scores of bees appear at the saucer. Yes, bees have a language, a wiggle and buzz language, which tells the worker where the food is with amazing accuracy. A bee will continue to gather food until 5 or 6 weeks after emerging as an adult. She will die, worked to death. This is the life of a worker bee. Egg, larva, pupa in a sealed cell, adult, taking on one complex job after another, doing each well without any training at all. Yes, the bee knows how to feed the larvae, how to build honeycomb with its special design, how to cool and warm the hive, how to speak and understand the bee language, not because it has learned these things, but because it has these abilities implanted within it. During the spring and summer, when most flowers are blooming, there will be as many as 80,000 bees in the hive. The number will drop to 15,000 or less during the cold winter months, when plants are dead or dormant. At the approach of spring, many bees hatch. There will be many thousand workers ready to gather food from the opening flowers. The egg from which each bee hatches was laid by a queen bee, a fertile female. There is always one queen in a hive. If something happens to her, a new queen has to be produced. The nurses select several very young larvae, some that would normally grow up to become workers. The nurses enlarge the cells and feed these larvae lots of bee milk for their entire development, rather than changing their diet after 3 days. This abundant food produces a queen rather than a worker. After her mating flight, the queen begins to lay eggs, her only task in the hive. She may lay 2,000 eggs in a single day. Thus, all the 80,000 workers in a hive may be her daughters. The male bees are called drones. During the spring and summer, when they may be needed to mate with a new queen, the hive supports a few hundred of them. They are rather helpless fellows which must be fed and groomed by the smaller workers. But their large eyes and large wings enable them to follow and to catch a young queen high in the air where they mate. The drone is marvelously fitted for his only job, guaranteeing another generation. We have seen the 3 different types of bees in a hive. One queen, the mother of all the others, a few hundred drones, available if needed to father another generation, many thousand workers, who feed, guard, and care for all the bees. Bees are amazing and fascinating creatures. Their hives are marvels of organization and order. Each bee does its tasks without direction, yet all of the many necessary tasks get done. In fact, in an emergency, almost any worker will do any job necessary to save the hive, for it is only the hive which matters in the bee society. The individual bee is of no importance. Thus, a bee which blunders into a spider's web is left to be eaten. there is never any rescue attempt. In the fall, or whenever there is a shortage of nectar, all the drones are driven out of the hive or killed to save food. Bees have no pensions. Sick bees are killed and dragged out of the hive. Bees have no hospitals. The individual bee counts for nothing. How different from the bee's society is man's, where the individual and his needs are constantly considered. But then, honeybees live a purely animal existence. They cannot change their way of life. But we are different. We have the power to learn from our recorded experiences, the power to understand the world about us, the power to originate, the power and to help, our Creator, to recognize the source of all our abilities. Because of the greatness of these gifts, it is obvious that man was never intended to live merely as an animal. We have the responsibility of using all our powers for good, of making our communities the right kind of places, the best possible places for men to live.
Film. So that was not Dr. Irwin Moon who was narrating. It's another guy who kind of started narrating some of the films. Yeah, it's fascinating. So it's, it has some information about bees and their life cycle and what they do and all that stuff, and that's mostly factual. But then they take this departure and talk about, like, well, this is a social order, but we're not like this, and it's essentially it's in response to a bunch of educational films that talk about the social order and do a comparison between us as a human society or mostly Western society, and insects, and talking about the different classes and all that stuff, and they took offense at that, and they were like, well, that doesn't introduce the concept of morality and empathy for others. And what's interesting is, if you look at what they talk about, we see how Western society doesn't seem to value that anymore. If somebody gets sick and dies, they die. There's hospitals, but we're not really making them accessible for a lot of people, and all that stuff is just kind of this fascinating look at then and now. So maybe we are more like bees than we thought. But yes, that's my socialist soapbox, because I am the villain. So let's pick up in the episode of Batman versus the Filmmaster. We see that I have, in the Filmmaster's hideout, at last, the Count Spirochete film is mine. Mwahahaha. Let me do that again. Mwahahaha. And so, I don't know if you can see in the window, it looks like Batman and Robin are appearing in. Crash! Wait, this got cut off. I'll move that down. It's still not there. I just got this new book scanner visual presenter, and so I'm still kind of learning it. Crash! So they come through the window, and Batman says, "Halt, evildoer," and he has the Batamaran in his hand. Let me move it up so you can see it. And then I pull out my weapons, which are 2 servings of frozen lasagna. Then I throw them. smack, smack, and I hit them both in the head with frozen lasagna. Then the telecine says they are transported into the film. And then so they are transported back into Books Are for Burning, which is kind of a recap of what was on the cover of this comic book. And then it's me saying, welcome to the lunchtime streaming show. I'm wearing my AV Geek shirt. This is just incredible. Here's a film about house fires. Enjoy. And I have a thing of lasagna in my hand. And the narrator says, your house is on fire because of the paint thinner you spilled. And Batman and Robin are actually in the film. Gosh, Batman, where is the disembodied voice coming from? And Batman says, I don't know. And then I look, and it says no dialogue. And then, hey, we're cartoons. Holy animation cell, Robin says. Then, here's a film about ladies reminiscing. Enjoy. And Batman says, I know this, a copyrighted film. We just have to wait for YouTube to take it down. Oh, so they must have watched that cartoon that got taken down about the women that were reminiscing about their past. Yes, we just have to sit through this boring film, Robin says. The copyright claim, the YouTube copyright claim. And I say, where'd it go? God, this is just killing me. It's so good. And then, they get spit out. And then I say, I'm going to go get a hot dog. Have a great rest of your day. And then I see Batman and Robin have appeared. Henchmen attack. And got you, you film thief. And then there's this really fascinating. I should put this, if I have a tombstone, maybe I should just put this here. Pow, Zock, Bam, Crunch, and then I have my eyes X'd out, so I got it beat up. And then the police officer said, the cop says, we did all the work. And I say, no, you didn't. And the cop says, I know, and he's sad. And then Batman and Robin say, we did it. Yay! The end. All right, so that's that's enough of that. Sorry, again, it's a big divergence, but man, so good. All right, so this film is interesting. It's not made for kids. It's made, and I'm not quite sure who it's made for. I feel like it might be made for school councils or parent-teacher associations, PTAs. So this is Environment for Education. And it tries to tackle two issues related to the difficulty of teaching in the early 70s. See if you can guess what they are. Enjoy.
Oh, look what they have done. What a mess. Children, stay back until the broken glass is cleaned up. Honestly?
Mrs. Bell, they've done it again. It's like the third time this week. I'm getting mighty tired cleaning up this glass.
Do you all have your homework for today?
All right, Mrs. Bell, I think I have it all now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Williams.
Yes, ma'am.
Children, you may be seated now. Children, up to this point, we've talked about the colonists and why they left England. everybody's eyes this way. Children, up to this point, we've talked about the colonies and how they left England and why they left England. Today, we're going to talk about some of the things they did when they came to America. We're ready now to come together and share information with each other. We are ready to share information with each other. We are ready to share information with each other.
Well, you've just seen and heard the problem. Is that any way to have to teach a class? Obviously no. But let me give you some facts on the scope of the problem. Schools all over the nation are wrestling with the problems of vandalism and noise pollution. Let's discuss the problems one at a time and then consider solutions. Let's take the problem of vandalism first. Over 80% of the nation's school administrators list vandalism as a top priority problem. 80%. Broken glass, broken equipment, fire damage. Here are some astounding figures. In one recent year, the city of Chicago spent over $2 million replacing broken glass in schools. That's right, over $2 million. Skipping around the country. Los Angeles, California, $653,000. Washington, D.C., $477,000. Baltimore, Maryland, $314,000. New York City, over $1 million. To illustrate the escalation of the costs of vandalism over a little more than a decade, let's take one city as an example. Let's take Washington. Around the end of the 50s, Washington spent $40,000 per year for glass breakage. In 1969, Washington budgeted $250,000 for that purpose and ran out of money before the year ended. And now the latest figure we mentioned for Washington was $477,000. Can anything be done about this? Well, someone came up with the idea of using unbreakable plastic in lieu of glass. For example, Washington, D.C. spent $2.5 million for new plastic panes. Other cities, such as Boston, Los Angeles, St. Louis, Baltimore, also spent huge sums of money on plastic panes on the theory that while initially expensive, in the long run it would save money since it would relieve the necessity of constant replacement of glass. But the trouble is, the vandals discovered that plastic panes could be damaged also. Like this. With a number of panes looking like this, you might as well not have any window at all in vulnerable locations. Another method of harassment is using cigarette lighters to write obscene words on the plastic, which cannot be erased. The only other alternative solution to the window problem is removing the sash and bricking up the window openings. This is even more costly than using plastic panes. Besides this expense, building codes will require the installation of air conditioning, since ventilation has been cut off. Not only are school systems paying huge amounts for window damage, they are also experiencing tremendous increases in the cost of insurance due to vandalism. One school board was refused insurance by a pool of insurance companies because of its claims due to vandalism. Insurance could only be obtained by a huge premium raise. An estimated $200 million a year throughout the nation is going down the drain in glass breakage in schools. For that amount of money, we could build 250 new elementary schools, or 50 new high schools. This doesn't mean that glass must be eliminated from school construction. There are many less vulnerable places where it can be used effectively with much less likelihood of damage. Let's discuss that second problem, the one we just heard, noise, the intrusion of unwanted sound. That's what noise is, any kind of unwanted sound. It can be any sound that is unexpected or interfering. like that playing. It can be an inappropriate sound, like a candy wrapper at a music concert. Or it can be a disturbing intermittent sound which is hard to locate and identify. Like vandalism, noise pollution is a major problem affecting the schools today. Our modern environment is getting noisier all the time. Scientists tell us that noise in most of America is twice as loud as it was 15 years ago. 15 years from now, it may be twice as loud again. The unit of measurement for sound is the decibel. Or dB. 0 decibels represents the beginning of audible sound for a healthy young set of ears. Human hearing ability can range from 0 to 130 dB. Average busy street noise is about 60 to 70 dB. A truck produces around 80 to 90 dB. 85 decibels of sound can cause hearing loss if constant and prolonged. 120 decibels is at the threshold of pain. Since we cannot close our ears to shut out sudden noise, we must reduce the noise reaching them. A blender used in a kitchen or a pneumatic jackhammer in the street both produced around 82 to 92 dB. A power lawnmower or an outboard motor both produce around 92 to 102 dB. The noise of a motorcycle is from about 102 to 112 dB. A jet aircraft taking off produces around 135 to 150 dB. As time goes by and more attention is paid to the problem of noise in our environment, we're discovering phenomena which were not readily apparent a few years ago. This popular loud rock music has a doubly bad effect upon its listeners. It has both a physical and a mental effect. The decibel output of the average hard rock band runs from around 102 to 112. Prolonged exposure can cause hearing loss. According to psychologists, if the music reaches about 130 dB, it blots out mental processes and provides a means of escape. This is Mr. Robert Newman of Cambridge, Massachusetts, an acoustical consultant and professor of architecture at Harvard and MIT. He has advised many architects, both here and abroad, on noise problems in the design. Would you tell us about the effects of noise pollution on our everyday lives?
We think of noise pollution as something that's new, something characteristic of modern civilization, but actually it's been around for a long time. The philosopher Schopenhauer wrote an essay on noise more than 100 years ago, and I'd like to read you just a little excerpt from that essay. He says, "The truly infernal cracking of whips in the narrow, resounding streets of the town must be denounced as the most unwarrantable and disgraceful of all noises. It deprives life of all peace and sensibility. Nothing gives me so clear a grasp of the stupidity and thoughtlessness of mankind as the tolerance of the cracking of whips." And it's rather interesting to note that the cracking of a whip is merely a small-scale sonic boom. Now, there is a lot of unnecessary noise in our environment. I hardly think that it's the leading cause of mental illness or that it's the slow agent of death as it's been described, but there's a lot of noise that we don't have to put up with. We must understand also that there's no need for an enormous amount of research or investigation into how to control noises. We have the technology at hand. All we have to do is apply it, and then we'll solve the problems. Now, transportation is one of our principal sources of noise. Transportation and the internal combustion engine. The internal combustion engine as we see it on construction sites, as we see it in trucks, motorcycles, and buses and cars, and so forth. We hear a lot about the increase in noise level in our cities today, Actually, it isn't increasing so much in a given point in the city as it is spreading out further and further into the suburbs. In other words, larger and larger areas are now subjected to noise. Let's remember that buildings and cities are for people, and it's people that establish the criteria towards which we design.
Today in the United States, we're experiencing a change in our concept of schools, how a school should be designed, what teaching methods should be used. The teaching methods dictate to some extent the design of a school. We are gradually reverting to something on the order of the one-room school used in the last century. Only today's schools are large and spacious. The analogy lies in the fact that fewer and fewer partitions are being used to separate classes and different types of learning activity. The newer schools also show considerable change in exterior construction. Good design can provide schools with protection against vandalism, noise pollution, natural disaster hazards, and against radioactive fallout in the event of a nuclear disaster. In a school design study conducted at California State Polytechnic College School of Architecture under the auspices of the Defense Civil Preparedness Agency, students were invited to work with well-known architects on designs for schools protected against various environmental hazards. The group produced models and drawings of 5 school designs which combine fallout protection with protection against man, pollution, and the elements. The total design concept was used to solve these real problems. They were considered, before design began, as important factors in each school project. They were kept in mind by the design teams from the very beginning of the design process. As a result, important protective features were included imaginatively, without impairing function or appearance, and with little or no increase in estimated construction costs. For those interested, protective school design information is available from the Defense Civil Preparedness Agency, Washington, D.C. Now let's look at some actual examples of schools in use today which have been designed and built with environmental hazards in mind. This is a new school in Swanton, Vermont. It's the Missisquoi Valley Union High School. Basically, it's a group of round structures or pods connected. The various pods contain space for different school activities. One is an academic complex. The perimeter is an open hallway joining 11 classrooms. The open concept allows for team teaching and other educational techniques. Notice the absence of windows in vulnerable locations and the massive design of the walls. Glass damage in this school would not be the problem it is in older type schools with large expanses of windows near the ground. In addition to reducing the potential for vandalism, these solid walls combat noise pollution. The Department of Housing and Urban Development, in its Guide to Architects and Engineers on the Control of Noise, states that for any given type of construction, the heavier or more massive the wall or floor structure, the better its sound insulation. This is East Central High School in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The building was designed with curved double exterior walls to develop strength and provide for better climate control and sound control. This is important because the high school is near the Tulsa International Airport. The masonry exterior walls are supported on a steel frame. Mass used to attenuate sound and reduce vandalism also produces a bonus by increasing the school's ability to provide fallout shelter spaces at no extra cost. The building is air-conditioned and virtually windowless. Windows are located over the 4 major entrances. The same designs and materials which give protection against vandalism, noise pollution, and natural disasters also provide excellent protection from radioactivity. School children represent more than a quarter of the total population of the United States. Their safety is naturally a vital concern to all of us. In the face of natural and nuclear hazards, children are relatively defenseless. Fallout protection is an added safety feature that can be incorporated into school buildings which house our youngsters for a good portion of the day and provide additional emergency shelter for the community in time of disaster. The Nathan Hale Intermediate School of Crestwood, Illinois, is located in an area which occasionally experiences tornadoes. The gymnasium was therefore designed to shield against the force of a tornado. A folded roof of concrete and brick-based concrete walls provide the desired protection. The design for tornado protection needed only minor additional considerations to meet fallout protection requirements as well. This is Lamar High School, Lamar, Colorado. Here we see strong masonry and brick construction. This facility can double as a fallout shelter if necessary. Notice the minimal window area at vulnerable locations. No vandalism potential here. At Conway, Arkansas, they were running out of open space on the campus of Hendrix College. When the college built a new library, it was put below ground to preserve a quadrangle. The results, the added bonus of no vandalism, noise pollution, or natural disaster problems, and of course, plenty of fallout protection. This is the new Walbrook High School in Baltimore, Maryland. The massive type of construction shown here affords ample protection against noise pollution, vandalism, the natural elements, and would provide excellent protection against fallout radiation. Yet, it contains pleasant glassed-in vistas to an open court. The Dr. Charles R. Drew Junior High School in Detroit, Michigan, was purposely designed to minimize the effects of vandalism in potential civil disturbances. A disturbance occurred at the school shortly after it was opened. This is Louis Goldstein, staff architect for the Detroit Board of Education. Would you please tell us about the disturbance?
The incident occurred when an emergency substitute teacher was released from the school. Approximately 100 students took part in the demonstration. The damage occurred principally at the entrance to the school, to the plexiglass windows, and to the lockers inside the school.
Do you feel that damage was limited by the architect's design of the school?
Definitely. In a conventionally designed school, the damage would have exceeded $100,000. In this case, it was less than 1/10 of that.
With vision, judgment, and common, today's architect can solve for the educator the problems created by environmental hazards. We can give for our children a pleasant and protective environment for education.
So it's interesting that Civil Defense Preparedness Agency did that film, because it talks a little bit about fallout, but there's other issues, obviously. So it's a very 70s film. E.G. Marshall. Here's a drawing of the other room at the archive, and it is coming true. There is a bunch of lasagna now at the archive, thanks to the kids and what they want. Thanks everybody for tuning in today and for indulging me in showing the Batman episode that featured the film master, who was me. This is not quite the costume I was wearing, but this is the costume that we are wearing tonight at 9 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time, and I'm putting a link to it in the comments, and I'll put it on various social media. Yeah, so tonight it's Katrina and I versus Joe and Nick, and Tim League from the Alamo Draft House is the judge, and it's tough for him because he's friends with both of us. So, yeah, and what's at stake? Well, the clown Thanksgiving painting, the club painting that we won last year, and we'll lose both of those if we lose. And you guys pick 4 very strong songs, jingles, toe tappers, and the judging did not quite go as I expected. And oh yeah, if we win, then Joe and Nick will come down to Raleigh, North Carolina, and serve the AV Geek staff dressed as clowns. Serve us a Thanksgiving meal. It doesn't have to be Thanksgiving, but they will serve us a meal dressed as clowns, recreating the clown Thanksgiving painting that is behind me. Thanks for tuning in. If you like what you saw, you can buy us coffee at ko-fi.com/avgeeks. Some of that money might go towards, buying us some lasagna. Thanks again. Everybody have a great weekend. Take care of yourself. We love you guys. I love that you allow us to meander. It's not just about 16 millimeters. It's this weird, I don't know. It's all weird. But thank you for indulging that, and we'll see you again soon. Everybody take care. Bye.